The call came at dawn. Captain Daniel Cade stood alone on the airbase tarmac, the sky still dark except for a thin line of silver rising behind the mountains. He had been deployed many times before, to deserts, to frozen borders, to places the world forgot, but this mission carried a different weight. A small nation in the far eastern part of the world had been swallowed by a growing force of Taliban militants. Cities had fallen. Families had vanished. Fear had settled in like a permanent season. Most nations hesitated. Daniel did not. He tightened the straps on his pack, stepped aboard the transport aircraft, and closed his eyes as the engines roared awake. Under his breath, he whispered the vow he had carried for years.
If I can save even one life, I'll give everything.
The aircraft descended hours later into a land wounded by conflict. Dust drifted across abandoned roads. Smoke curled from rooftops that once sheltered laughter. Villages clung to mountain cliffs like memories fighting not to fade. Civilians approached him with quiet relief, hope carried on the back of a soldier they had never met. Daniel joined a small local unit, fighters who knew the terrain better than their own pulse. Sarif, a former schoolteacher turned protector. Lena, a scout with eyes sharp enough to read the wind. Ibrahim, a sniper whose silence spoke louder than sorrow ever could. Together, they began a long journey through unforgiving mountain paths and narrow canyons where the wind howled warnings. 4 days they traveled, moving across shattered towns and burned-out markets. In one ruined village, Daniel stepped into a house split open by an explosion. A child's sandal lay in the dust. A cradle lay overturned. Sarif knelt beside it with shaking hands. "They give us no time to grieve," he whispered. Daniel placed a hand on his shoulder. "This ends. We will end it." As they searched the ruins, they found a lone boy hidden under the floorboards. His name was Aaron. His village had been taken, everyone captured or killed. He clung to Daniel's sleeve, trembling. "You're safe now," Daniel told him. "And we're going to save the others too." Aaron revealed a hidden trail, the same route the militants used to move captives deeper into the mountains. It would cut hours off their journey. They followed it in silence, driven by urgency. Days later, under a cold, starless night, they finally reached a high ridge overlooking the Taliban stronghold. Fires burned in metal drums around the compound. Armed patrols circled like wolves. Shadows moved across the walls, long and distorted. Daniel studied the layout. "The hostages are being held near the center," he said. Ibrahim exhaled slowly. "One wrong shot starts a massacre." Daniel shook his head. "No shots unless necessary. We move at dawn. Fast and quiet." The night dragged on. Daniel sat awake, Aaron wrapped in his jacket sleeping beside him. The soldier watched the distant fires and prepared himself for what the morning would demand. When dawn arrived, it arrived violently. The team moved through the shadows, scaling the outer wall, slipping into the compound undetected, until a guard spotted movement and shouted. Gunfire erupted instantly, tearing through the still morning air. Daniel reacted like a storm breaking open, pushing forward through smoke and shrapnel, clearing paths for his team. "Keep moving," he shouted. They reached the hostage building. Daniel kicked the door open. Inside, families huddled against the wall, trembling. "It's all right," he called out. "We're here to take you home." A mother sobbed that her son couldn't walk, his leg broken. Daniel lifted the boy into his arms without hesitation. We moved together. Explosions shook the compound. Dust fell from the ceiling. Smoke stung their eyes. But step by step they guided the families toward the extraction point. Halfway through, a blast threw Daniel to the ground. Blood trickled down his forehead. His ears rang. But he forced himself to stand. The boy in his arms whimpered softly, gripping his vest. "I've got you," Daniel whispered. "I'm not leaving you." The escape became a sprint through chaos. Bullets cracked against walls. Ibrahim covered their retreat with flawless precision. Lena led families through clouds of dust. Sarif carried 2 children at once, refusing to stop even as exhaustion tore at his lungs. When they reached the outer valley, helicopters thundered overhead. Reinforcements had arrived. General Zahir's voice came through the radio. "Bring them home." And they did. By mid-morning the stronghold fell. Taliban fighters scattered into the mountains. Smoke drifted away like the last breath of a nightmare. Families collapsed into each other's arms, crying with relief. Children stepped into the sunlight again, their eyes blinking against brightness they had not seen in weeks. Daniel sat on a stone near the ridge, exhausted, wounded, but alive. A small girl approached him, her hands shaking. She offered him a woven bracelet, blue and gold threads intertwined. "For saving us," she whispered. Daniel smiled softly and slipped it onto his wrist. Not as a trophy, but as a promise. He stayed for weeks afterward, helping rebuild homes, delivering supplies, teaching local fighters how to defend their land. He carried Aaron on his shoulders as the boy laughed again for the first time since losing his family. He shared tea with elders. He walked through villages rising again from ash. When it was finally time to leave, a quiet crowd gathered at the runway. No cheers. No speeches. Just gratitude, deep and wordless. Aaron hugged him tightly. "You saved us," the boy said. Daniel touched the bracelet on his wrist. "You saved yourselves," he replied gently. "I only helped." As the aircraft lifted into the sky, Daniel looked down at the mountains and valleys he had fought to protect. The eastern wind pressed against the window, warm and familiar, as if whispering farewell. He closed his eyes and breathed in the memory of every life he touched, every life he carried to safety, every promise he kept. He had never seen himself as a hero. But somewhere in that far eastern land, in rebuilt villages glowing with new light, the people would forever remember the soldier who walked into the wind and refused to let fear decide the fate of a nation. And the land whispered the truth he already knew. Courage, when carried with a true heart, can change the world. The aircraft carved through the morning sky, leaving the mountains behind, but Captain Daniel Cade couldn't shake the feeling that the mission wasn't finished. Far below, the land looked peaceful again, like a painting slowly repairing itself. Villages where children now played. Roads where farmers returned pushing carts filled with grain. Smoke no longer rising from rooftops but from kitchens preparing breakfast for families reunited. It should have brought him comfort. But Daniel's instincts rarely lied. When the aircraft landed back at the forward base, a messenger was already waiting for him, breathing hard, dust clinging to his boots as if he had run for miles. "Captain Cade," he said urgently. "You're needed in the briefing room." Immediately, Daniel followed without a word. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy. General Zahir stood at the head of the table, an intelligence map projected behind him. The lines on the screen told a story Daniel didn't want to hear. "The militants are regrouping," Zahir said quietly. "Not far from the valley you just secured." Daniel stepped closer to the map. "They're coming back for the civilians?" The general nodded. "Worse. We intercepted transmissions. They plan to recapture the freed families and destroy every village that sheltered them after the escape." A slow, cold anger rose in Daniel's chest. "So we stopped them," he said. Zahir sighed. "There's more. They've taken a new mountain fortress, a deeper one harder to access than the last. They've brought reinforcements. They're expecting retaliation this time." Daniel didn't hesitate. "Tell me what we have." The general turned toward him. 70 local fighters. A handful of special forces. And you." Daniel exhaled sharply through his nose, half a laugh, half disbelief. "And them?" 300 men. Armored trucks. Mortars. "Great," Daniel said. "A fair fight." The room fell silent. Then Lena stepped inside, placing her rifle on the table. "You're not going alone," she said. Ibrahim followed. Sarif entered behind them. "We started this together," Sarif said. "We finish it together." Daniel looked at each of them, tired, wounded, but unbroken. "All right," he said. "Then we move at nightfall." The second march into darkness. By sunset, their small force was already climbing through the mountain forests. The air smelled of pine and cold soil. The wind carried the distant echo of enemy engines. Far below, lanterns glowed like fireflies in the windows of newly rebuilt homes depending on them. Daniel led the way, scanning every shadow. Aaron walked beside him, refusing to stay behind at the base. Daniel slowed. "Aaron, you should be resting. You've been through enough." The boy kept walking. "If they take my people again, I won't hide this time." Daniel placed a hand on his shoulder, firm but gentle. "You're brave. But tonight you stay with the medics. I need you alive, not proving something you already showed me." Aaron looked up at him, eyes shining with stubborn courage. "You'll come back, right?" Daniel hesitated. He never made promises he wasn't sure he could keep. But tonight he broke his rule. "I'll come back," he said quietly. "I promise." The storm beyond the ridgeline. Hours later, they reached the cliff overlooking the new fortress. This stronghold was different. Larger, fortified, dug into the mountainside like a wounded beast curled around its secrets. Trucks lined the outer walls. Floodlights swept across the ground. But Daniel didn't focus on the guns or the towers. He focused on the cage. At the center of the compound, a metal cage holding dozens of villagers, including men and women he recognized from the rescue days earlier. Faces drained of hope. Children silent from fear. Daniel's jaw clenched. "They tracked them," Lena whispered. "They always do." Daniel stepped forward, eyes fixed on the fortress. "Then we make this their last hunt." He turned to his fighters. "No glory speeches. No drama. Just this: we get those people out. We break this mountain open. And we leave nothing behind that can hurt them again." The fighters nodded. The night air thickened. Then Daniel said the words that ignited the storm. "Move." The silent breach. They split into teams. Lena disabled the floodlights with precise, quiet shots. Ibrahim positioned himself on a cliff, his sniper scope reflecting the moon. Seraph and the local fighters crept along the lower ridge, planting charges along the armored trucks. Daniel moved like a shadow among shadows, slipping down the slope, crossing the outer perimeter, and climbing the inner wall with only a rope and his strength. Every step closer to the cage sharpened his heartbeat. Then a voice echoed behind him. "Stop." A flashlight beam cut through the darkness. Daniel spun, grabbed the guard, and silenced him with a swift, efficient strike, catching the body before it hit the ground. The alarm didn't sound. He pressed forward. The fire in the mountain. When the first explosion hit, Seraph's charges, the entire fortress jolted awake. Gunfire erupted. Fighters poured from the barracks. Floodlights flickered back to life. Daniel didn't hide. He sprinted directly toward the cage as bullets tore across the courtyard. Ibrahim's cover fire took down enemy after enemy. Lena flanked from the rooftops, clearing a path. Daniel reached the cage, grabbed the lock, and smashed it with the butt of his rifle until metal bent beneath brute force. "It's safe," he shouted. "Move." Terrified families rushed out as chaos swallowed the compound. Smoke, fire, screams, stone shattering under mortar blasts. A small boy tripped as he ran. Daniel scooped him into his arms and kept going. Fallen beams, burning debris, bullets slicing past his shoulders. A second explosion blasted behind him, too close. He shielded the boy with his body, taking shrapnel across his vest. "I've got you," he whispered. "Hold on." The last stand at the eastern gate. The team regrouped near the exit path, a narrow stone gate carved into the mountain. Daniel ordered the civilians through first. Behind them, militants regrouped, pushing forward in waves, shouting, firing relentlessly. Ibrahim ran out of ammo. Lena was down to her last magazine. Seraph clutched a bleeding arm but stayed standing. Daniel turned back toward the fortress. "We hold them here," he said. And they did. Side by side. Shoulder to shoulder. Against impossible odds. Until the last of the civilians reached safety. Only then did Daniel give the retreat signal. "Fall back." The wind that carried them home. They climbed through the final pass as the sun broke over the horizon. Reinforcements arrived at the valley's edge, guiding the families to medical tents. Aaron sprinted toward Daniel the moment he saw him. "You came back," the boy said breathlessly, hugging him. Daniel ruffled his hair. "A promise is a promise." The wind swept across the valley, the same eastern wind that had greeted him on the day of his arrival. This time it felt warm, alive, hopeful. Daniel looked around at the people he had saved twice. The land was still wounded but healing. Not because of one man, but because courage can spread like fire, lighting every life it touches. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel allowed himself to breathe. Not as a soldier, but as someone who had helped a nation stand again. Do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more stories like this. Or, if you want us to bring you the part 2 of this story, let us know in the comments section.